Arteta! What a strike! What a screamer! Zola! And a fantastic goal! Arsenal back in it! Here's Limpar, lines it up, finds the net. Arsenal in front.
Welcome to the Arsenal Vision Prematch live show. My name is Elliot Smith. You can block me on Twitter at Yankee Gunner. We want to thank our overlords, the people that created this. What is this? This is the Lawnmower 3.0. I just used it. We'll talk more about that later, but I want to thank Manscaped, and you can go to manscaped.com, use promo code ArsenalVision, save 20% because we love Manscaped, they love us, and this show is presented by Manscaped. So thanks to them. Thanks to you. We're going to be taking your comments. Let me tell you what's going to be happening during this show. James Benge is going to be here. That's right. So we have a bona fide superstar. James Benge will be here. Tim Stillman will be here. Paul Cassidy will be here. Clive will be here. I know. Settle down. It's going to be okay. But yes, Clive is going to be here. Jessica Black is going to be here. Scott Willis is going to be here. Bumper show. We're going to talk fan forum. We're going to talk Super League. We're actually going to talk, and I have this, hang on, I have it written down. Football. It says here, we're going to talk about football. So that'll be new. Let me introduce to you, though, James Benge. You can find him on Twitter at James Benge. Hello, James. Good to have you here, my friend.
Hi, thank you. As I said on Twitter, I bullied my way on here. I wanted to come on here, so I demanded that I come on here. And here I am.
And here you are indeed. So I don't want to waste any time. We are going to get to questions and things like that, but I want to just quickly start with fan forum reactions. So, look, whether you want to give credit or no credit, and I'm inclined to give no credit because that's the mood I'm in, Josh Kroenke and Vinay Venkatesham did show up virtually, as we are doing now, to the fan forum and had their say about all things Super League. They were pressed pretty hard. The reaction was what you'd expect. Let me just start with your general takeaways. We'll get into some specifics, but what are some of your general takeaways from this fiasco and the way they reacted to it at the fan forum?
I don't think Josh Kroenke gets it. I mean, we know he doesn't understand Arsenal. And I've met him before, and I've never got the sense of a man who particularly really gets it. I think I've got the sense he'd like to, but I think what was more concerning for me is I still didn't think he quite understood why there was such a problem with this. And the quote that stood out in that regard was, we thought you all wanted, all the global fans, I thought you all wanted to play Barcelona all the time, but now you can go and have your games against Stoke City, which obviously I think was a relation to the banner, but I would feel like someone that knows Arsenal would kind of know that, saying you lot can go and play Stoke City is a really strange comment to make. And I thought it was riven with quite a few strange comments. Obviously, you have an immediate reaction as quotes filter out to you from people that were at the meeting. I spoke to several people at the meeting, and they all kind of said to me, you should hear what he said about Baku. And then you sort of see it written down, and you kind of see that he had issues with it, but he also kind of, his immediate reaction when talking about Baku, which he does enjoy talking about, was that he couldn't get over how great a trip it was. It just feels like a man that has been at Arsenal a very long time and been around Arsenal a very long time to not understand a thing about fan culture, about Arsenal's culture specifically, and about what really matters to them. It was remarkable as well to see him say, I know that there's never been any trust between KSE and Arsenal. Well, KSE have been involved in the club over 10 years. This was the second fan forum that Kroenke had attended. The first was just before the We Care to You movement, but certainly when there was murmuring fan resentment. So I just, for me, it appears to be words. We obviously can't judge actions yet, but it's words.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's right. I've got a lot of notes that I want to go through from the fan forum specifically, and some things that I think are interesting. In terms of the global fans want to see us play Barcelona, that obviously is something that touches a nerve with me as, I guess, what would qualify as a global fan. I think the owner or a representative of the owner even making a distinction between global fans is a little bit grotty because, especially right now when no one's in the stadium, everyone is just a fan. But I think it definitely strikes at the heart of the divide in that we are now a club that drives more of its revenue from broadcast, more of its revenue from sponsorships than match day going fans. And as a result, he's telling you what he thinks basically, which is we have shifted our priorities to serving this global audience rather than our local audience. And James, I feel like this does a few things. It drives a wedge within the fan base, which is unhealthy and no good for anybody. It emphasizes where they see the future, which is clearly not prioritizing the match-going fan and the community experience, which is upsetting even for me as someone who's not a part of it. And I think it also misunderstands the idea that people somehow want Christmas every day. We were bored playing Bayern Munich after 2 consecutive seasons, in part because of how those games went. But these games are only special when you earn them and when they come around once in a while. So those things all bother me. I mean, how do you feel about an ownership group really putting a name to the fact that they do see fans in different ways and are starting to prioritize different fans' needs and interests?
It is... I mean, as I think you're a great case in point for this, Elliot, and the guys on this podcast.
Now I'm nervous. Okay, go for
it. What do global Premier League fans gravitate to? I mean, they gravitate to something that has a sense of place, has a sense of purpose. You go and talk to people at NBC about why the Premier League is such a successful, has proved to be such a successful investment for them. And it was that sense of a place and a community that you could, you can't be quite the same part of, but you can feel yourself gravitating towards, that these aren't sort of nicknames. I really don't want to pitch this as like American franchise model versus English Premier League, because there are clearly things that a franchise model does really well. It's a really responsible way to run a club. I'm starting to lose my train of thought. No,
it's fine. Look, I think one of the things that's interesting right now is the battle between the fans and the ownership had sort of died down to a certain extent, James. And now, what they've done with the Super League is they brought it right back into the focus. And right now, it's saying it looks like a match day outside, thousands on hand for the protest. I mean, in a way, it's live coverage from the Emirates protest, so I had to choose between you and that, Elliot. Hey, I'm sorry. Look, if you want to watch the protest, certainly, and jump in and out. I mean, my recommendation would be get 2 devices and have us on one screen. Obviously, that would be my preference. Yeah. But, I mean, in terms of this protest, we'll bring Paul on in a second because he's here as well. Are you going to cover the footage from the protest? We are certainly going to do that, yes. In a way, it's a shame that fans can't go into the stand because in the ground, when it's broadcast, when it's on TV, the chants, the songs, drowning out the sounds of the match, that's where it's going to be really powerful. I mean, do you anticipate KSC seeing this moment as a moment to reconsider owning the club altogether?
I can't speak for that because I just, as I said, I don't have any insight into the minds of billionaires. This is not a good time to be looking to sell a football club that everyone knows you're kind of not welcome at. This is the sort of time where I'm going to try and buy Arsenal for a bargain price because we know that there is an owner there that's really going to be feeling the pressure. Equally, there is an argument that the Cronkies will look at this and go, well, our dream of just buying our way back into footballing relevance is over. Do I want to spend the significant amount of my own money that will be required, probably, to get Arsenal back into the top 4 to make them a good sellable asset? Maybe I need to just cut my losses now. I can't make a judgment call. What I can say from experience is that, this stuff does, whether it gets straight to Josh and Stan, at the very least, it cuts right through Arsenal to such an extent that anyone who's even has the illusions of competency as an owner knows that they have to address it consistently. That this is not something you can hide away from. You'll remember on the tour just over 18 months ago, that what really forced the Cronkies out from hiding, and I know that there had been conversations about we're coming to Denver, can the Cronkies Josh or Stan, can one of them come out and speak? And it wasn't really going anywhere, was my understanding, until the We Care Do You movement, because one of the real advantages of the way that I think Arsenal fans have quite cogently got their point across is that it's really not, no one's demanding that they spend hundreds of millions of pounds of their own money. Of course, people would love to have an owner, I think, that buys them a fancy new toy every year. And one thing I think the Cronkies have been quite cynical about in recent years is just throwing money at the squad, whether it's Arsenal's money or not. A lot of it is Arsenal's money that's been refinanced in terms of debt. But the sort of, here's your fancy trinket, here's your Nicola Pepe. Will you be quiet now? It is. This is what gets through to them. AST calling for, you need to sit down with us frequently. I know that Josh has been invited to their next meeting as well, and it's a demand to engage with us. You don't have to sell up, but if you're going to stay, you actually do really need to talk to Arsenal fans, understand their concerns, understand what you can change about the match day experience, about how the club is run, who is responsible for the first team squad, who is responsible for the community work that you do. And that, I think, is the challenge there. Is it's very hard to turn around and go, yeah, sorry, well, actually, we can't talk to you. I thought one of the most damning things Josh said was, sorry, I've not been able to chat to you. There's been a pandemic on. It's like, we're all on Zoom, Josh. But
yeah, I mean, but now they can suddenly. Let me bring Paul in real quick. Paul's on Twitter, Pause My Pants. Hello, Paul.
Hello, James.
Hey, Paul.
Yes.
I'm excited about it.
I feel like we know each other.
Well, we do argue.
Yeah, we do. Who, me?
Yeah, imagine that. Paul, what's your take on the protest? I mean, I think it is, it's so funny how the only time we ever seem to come together as a fan base, truly come together as a fan base, is when our owner brings us together, which I guess we owe him a debt of gratitude for. But this is, this is really great to see this kind of turnout. I mean, pandemic stuff notwithstanding. Do you have any instinct about whether KSC have any concern or consideration for this going on?
Oh, I'm sure they do. Look, the one thing they've done very well to piss us off, and that always gets people together. To get people pissed off about the same thing. As I think I said earlier in the week, people are much better at knowing what they don't want. And we're very, very clear on a couple of things we don't want right now. One of them is the Super League, and the other is the Crankies, or the Crankies in this form of management and this relationship. The difficulty is for supporters. Like, if you want to talk about the fat cats and the billionaires and the club owners, the real corrective to that is the fans, the supporters. But for it to be the fans and supporters, they need to find a way that they can actually talk together. Because over time, we know we're going to kind of go our separate ways and get upset about different things and not feel connected and not feel we can act. And that's the beauty of today. It's everybody getting together. And that's the beauty of the supporters organizations playing a leading role. And they're going to see that the numbers of supporters organizations have swelled in response to this. And that it starts to give us a voice back to them. Because that's the real corrective with these guys over time. To have supporters organized with a voice or voices that can communicate back to the club, can give them a hard time when they're getting it wrong. I think they'll have learned something here. And I think the other interesting thing that came up, was it Jeremy Wilson wrote a thing on Arsene Wenger and why isn't he on the board? And I think it's a very interesting question. Whether you want Arsene Wenger on the board or not, right? There's a lot of people who have varying relationships with Arsene Wenger. There are those of us who'd want to protect him from going into the maelstrom again. But it is a fascinating question why the Cronkies don't want Arsene Wenger on their board. And I think the answer is clear, is they don't really want a board.
Yeah. I mean, what would a board even do? What is the point? I mean, James, like, I don't really see any change that can be engendered at the club when you have an owner that has 100% ownership. Is this the moment that England embraces the 50+1 kind of German model? I think that is probably a pipe dream because we're too late for that to come to pass. But do you have a sense of how you create a custodianship when you have owners that own 100% of a club?
I don't. Obviously, that is what the fan-led football review is about. I completely agree with you, Elliot. You can't push the genie back in the bottle. This is the billionaires' plaything league still. The fact that it's not the Super League, well, it's the Premier League. And, the whole Super League proposal was about Real Madrid, Barcelona, Juventus nerfing the Premier League now so that they could make their own with the fancy clubs from England. There are steps you can do, whether that is you could, one clear bit of legislation that was consistently been on the Labour platform, and I would suspect will now end up on the Conservative platform in the next election, is to have a fan representative on the board just as a legal requirement. It's not the same as a 50+1. They can't force change, and I don't think that's possible. I don't see a political will in Great Britain to effectively socialise football. However, I mean, how much does a voice on the board accomplish? Well, at Arsenal right now, nothing at all. But that doesn't mean that it can't. The reason the board is neutered is because Stan Kroenke hasn't set up a board. But if you have to have fans on there, then you have a board that argues, that says, where's Arsene Wenger, or where's Ian Wright, or where's Kelly Smith, or whoever that might be. And interesting, taking it way back now, I know that Ivan Gazidis, of all people, wanted to add a female presence and a former Arsenal footballer onto the board. It's possibly about the only thing he judged correctly in his last few years. But, you're not going to take the club away from, you're not going to have the UK government take the club away from Stan Kroenke, but you might at the very least force him into a situation where he has people in a room with him that he has to justify things to, like legally and formally, not, one fan forum a year.
I mean, well, I guess, hang on, we got to do something here. Paul, can we get a woohoo from you real quick?
Woohoo!
Okay, good. We didn't get it on the intro, and we're upsetting the audience, and we can't have that. Protest is ongoing outside the Emirates. I do think it's questionable what the impact will be, but that doesn't mean you don't do it. And Paul, this is the thing for me that I think is a tricky part of the conversation, and that is, you can acknowledge that getting rid of KSC doesn't fix the problems with UEFA, fix the problems with the Premier League, fix the problems with spending in football, and the arms race of spending in football doesn't fix the problems that you could get an owner that is much worse, or that maybe from an ethical standpoint you agree with much less, or upsets you. But I always think that the fact that it can get worse as a reason not to make an important change is a bad one. I've always said, when you sack a manager, you may get a worse manager. That's not the reason not to do it. Same thing with an owner. So how do you react to the debate or the argument that there are a lot of problems facing football that won't be fixed just by getting rid of KSE, and also that the next owner could be worse? I mean, my opinion, it's still a step. What's yours?
Well, it might be nice if the next owner was more competent. That's a parallel conversation. In terms of would he be better or worse, he'll be one of two types. He'll either be a fat cat billionaire, or he'll be an oligarch, despot, nation state, right? And really, I think the conversation's been really good, but we need to see it in terms of alliances. The big six are allied with their own type who have a similar agenda, and the other 14 are allied with the rest of the league who wants to get their fair share. And then you have the your Real Madrids and your Barcelonas who are for once are on the same page. And there are a number of camps. There's a reason the Kroenkes went along with this group and that Spurs went along with this group. It's because the fat cats were going, led by the Glazers and then by the FSG group. They weren't going to be left behind. You could change to a different fat cat. They still would have joined this group, because it's like playing Risk, right? If you've 20 players playing the board game Risk, what is the first thing you do? You start looking for alliances. Look at British history in terms of continental Europe. It was all about the Brits forming alliances. It was about England forming alliances, France forming alliances, Russia forming alliances, Germany, Prussia. Alliances are the first thing you do.
You get a lot of stuff on this live stream, folks. You're getting your history along with your football.
Okay, but it's really important to understand that the next owner you get in, the first thing he will do is align with people who have the same issues he does. He's going to align with the oligarchs and the fat cat billionaires. So you got to decide, is this billionaire better or worse than the next one? I don't think that's a reason to keep them or get rid of them. Competence might be, but I don't think that's what this is about. So, and the relationship with the owner is a process. And we were maybe building some level of relationship with the owner because they seemed to be somewhat investing in the club, and now they've pissed all over that. And now we start from scratch again. I do think there's the chance that they'll be better owners in the sense that they won't want to make this mistake again, and that they've made specific commitments. But I do think what they do on the board, we can say, what does the board matter? The board would have mattered if Arsene Wenger was on it.
Yeah.
If somebody else, they would not have done what they did without talking to Arsene Wenger, or he would have resigned and it would have been a scandal, or whoever it is you put in that place and a supporter representative. I do think that while we push Kroenke out, the minimum fallback position has to be representation on the board of people who have a voice.
Well, so let's, there's some things I want to interrogate here, James, that I think are really interesting. And one of the things that drives me crazy, and we had a comment in here as well, and I'll put it up on the screen because I said this on a podcast as well. This is your typical privatizing profits, socializing losses kind of model. Billionaires don't want to sharpen up their ideas and run their business better. They want to regulate away their challenges or consolidate so that there are no further challenges. There's a competitor, I'll acquire it. There's a situation causing me to lose money, I'll lobby the government and regulate it away. And this feels a lot like that to me, James, and I'll explain what I mean here real quick. If Arsenal were running the club at absolute optimal levels, and you're saying this system that we're operating in prevents us from being profitable and thriving, which may be the case, then you would have a little more of a platform. But Arsenal have been, candidly, a poorly run club. The way we give out contracts, the revolving door of cretins in the executive positions, it is a club that is not optimized. And instead of this billionaire saying, let me get smarter people in charge, let me make smarter choices about the way we spend our money and the contracts we give out, and not have a guy running the club who's treating it like a cash machine for his agent friends, and not give contracts to players who are looking for a retirement home, and let me optimize my spending. Then if you can't compete, at least you could say, I have tried to work within this system and can't make this system work. But isn't it a shameful admission when Arsenal says, the train was leaving the station, we had to get on? If you had been running the club better and been one of the top teams in England, you'd be driving that discussion. You're only having to get on the train at the end because you've not run the club better. So doesn't this sort of directly point at their failures in saying that, you know what? If you were more efficiently operating your club, you would have had more control of your destiny.
Yes, 100%, because that what you've talked about there, Elliot, that's really hard work from ownership down. You have to constantly be on the radar, because you don't just hire the right person and they're still the right person 3 years down the line. You don't hire Arsene Wenger in 1998 and he's the right person in 2015. It's constantly reviewing, constantly asking yourself at the highest level and down, have we got the right people in the right places? Have we got the right players? Is this the right CEO for where we are? How do we readdress, our aims, our goals? How do we rebalance our squad, say, after a period of success? The sort of things you see Manchester City doing very shrewdly. And that is really hard work when you, as an owner, are infinitely more invested in your passion project in Los Angeles. And you've kind of bought the club as we're going to leave it. And so this was the thing I was always told by people within Arsenal when I kind of had conversations that say, I'm not sure that the Kroenkes are good owners. They would sort of say, well, what more do you want? They hire people with track records for success in football and they let them get on with their job. Well, actually, the fact that I want you to check that they're doing their job well, and it shouldn't take a gigantic collapse in football performance, in how the club functions off the pitch. It shouldn't require mass redundancies before you look up and take notice. And as for the getting on the train point, I mean, there's one side note I'd like to mention here, which is I think how incredibly stupid for a club like Arsenal to not realise that the Super League invitation is going to still be there 3 or 4 or 5 days later or 5 weeks later, but that you don't need to be the ones taking the public battering for betraying your supporters. If let's say this had all got off the ground, Arsenal are going to be part of the Super League because they are the 7th or 8th or 9th biggest brand in the world. They're the biggest club in the 7th or 8th football brand, I should say, but the biggest club in the biggest city in Europe. There is a standing invitation for them, provided they don't massively screw it up over the next 10 years. And, in 10 years' time, that standing invitation might not be in place. But we all know that you have to have Arsenal in a Super League.
Well, I mean, I think
I don't think it's stupid to not let everyone else, if you're interested in it, let everyone else take the blame, let everyone else take the grief. And when it becomes inevitable, you go, well, look, we have to be part of it, don't we? How could we justify not being in this competition? That's a side note.
Yeah, you know what I would say, James, is I think the worst part of the reaction to this announcement were fans engaging in tribalism about what are Arsenal doing there? What are Spurs doing there? Because that shouldn't be the argument. If your argument is they picked the wrong teams, then you're not really saying the idea is bad. You're saying they just picked the wrong teams. This was never about merit on the pitch. This is about merit as a brand. And there's no argument that Arsenal is one of the biggest football brands. Somehow we've managed to retain that status despite every effort to destroy it. But on the pitch, we're not. And that's really the divide here. I guess the question then, and Paul, I'll let you have the first take of this, what becomes of the Super League? Because whether it's Florentino Perez saying this will happen, or whether it is, in the fan forum, they said very clearly the next time this comes up, we'll be better about communication. That's not exactly saying we learned our lesson and we'll crawl away with our tail between our legs. They quit the ECA, Paul. They have been kicked off their executive committee positions in the Premier League. So they're no longer part of the power structure of the existing system, which only creates more incentive to create a new system. I see a little bit of a streak in between these apologies. There's a streak of defiance that worries me. Is it next time they just try to invite a few more teams? They figure out how to get PSG and Bayern and Dortmund in. They get Ajax in. They go ahead and they grab a couple of teams that have big reputations from other leagues that weren't invited in this instance, and they come back appealing to a bigger base, having maybe just enough support behind it that they can push it through. What becomes of the Super League now? Because the notion that it's just totally dead seems far-fetched to me.
Well, I think what becomes of it depends on what you think the Glazers think will become of it. They're never going to want to give up on some of their fundamental tenets. Something equivalent to a salary cap is essential. There may be more openness. There may be more mobility up and down. There may be more factors that make it basically impossible for United not to be part of the European Super League or whatever it's called going forward, even if it looks like they could remotely get relegated. Premier League, United are never going to get relegated from it. So as long as they can make it look like it's so secure for them that the odds on them ever getting shifted out of it, plus they'd always have the money to buy their way straight back into it. So they may give on some of the terms around it, but I can't believe they'll go forward without something equivalent to a salary cap that guarantees that they can maintain a level of margin and business that makes it a profitable organization. The reason I talk about the Glazers is where goeth the Glazers, goeth Kroenke. He's been one voice that strangely spoke up for the Glazers in 2014 and at other times when they were under a little pressure getting some heat. He's always talked about how could you do the business any better than them, where you don't get the sense that Liverpool and Arsenal are tight, apart from when their agenda aligns. Basically stands wherever the Glazers are, and when they go again, we go again. So there might be some stipulations Stan has to put in because he's made commitments now to the supporter base to what he would do next time, but it will come again because they've got to look at this and say, hang on a second, these UEFA crooks are screwing it all up. They're taking money out of it. We could make 2 or 3 times the amount here. Yeah, we're going to have to give some, but the core thing is we're going to turn this into a profitable model and we're going to make 2 or 3 times the amount. It'll come again. Yeah,
I think that's well said. Last word from you, Paul, before we got to let you go. A quick stop in. So real quick, do you Do you feel that this will impact your relationship to the club, or have you long since separated the issues of ownership and the issues of money in the game with what you are as a fan?
I'm not. I haven't really learned anything that changes my fundamental relationship with the owners. We always knew something like where this was going, just not quite when and the final form. It does impact your relationship with the club, because if we end up in this kind of eternal low-level civil war with the club, we will also end up in a civil war with each other, because if there's a whole bunch that want cranky out now, and then a whole other bunch that say you're screwing up the team, the manager, you're peeing in the bathtub, after a few months, we won't all feel the same way about it. That's why I think supporters organizations are important, so that people can pull their voices together and discuss it in that form, and kind of separate that bit out a little bit from how they support the team. But it's going to impact us if we have this ongoing guerrilla warfare with the ownership, which will turn into a kind of a low-level unpleasantness among the supporters. It's going to impact us. Yeah, we will.
Well, we'll see. I'm going to promise you that we will talk a little bit of football today. We're going to talk about the Europa League semifinal. We're going to talk about how we get up for that and who's going to get picked for that. We'll even talk about this Everton game, which feels like an afterthought today. But Paul, unfortunately, that's it for you. So we'll talk to you hopefully on the Instant Reaction Pod for patrons.
All right, cool. Yeah. Nice to meet you, James. Bye.
Cheers, Paul.
Bye.
Thanks, Paul. James, I'm going to introduce you to a man who needs no introduction. His name is Tim. You can find him on Twitter at Storberto. Hello, Tim.
Hello, and Cronky out.
Yep. Yeah, and I'm gonna bring Scott in as well. You can find him on Twitter, _that_crab. Hello, Scott.
Yeehaw.
Yeehaw, indeed. A big day. And just real quick, James, I'll get to you before I bring Tim and Scott into the conversation here. As we look at this ongoing scenes of protest, I mean, this is quite something, isn't it? This is a reaction that, in my view, especially in the context of the pandemic, I think it's pretty hard for the club to ignore. Are you proud sounds condescending, but let's just go with it. Are you proud of the fans and this reaction and the mobilization?
I mean, the first thing I would say is I didn't see this coming. Tim will remember we all remember, but I'm sure Tim will remember heading to the Emirates in the era of Arsenal-Wenger protest marches, which felt like they were going to be momentous occasions in the history of the club, and we're about a couple of hundred people now. I can't judge how many are at the Emirates now when they can't go into the game, but it looks like thousands to me. I think, what I would say is cause for pride is that they've kind of been true to their word. I think it's very easy to stick the hashtag up, to stick the banner on your social media, and naturally, in the current climate, to just go, yeah, but I'm not gonna pop out, and I'm not gonna show the players and show the club what I expect. The one thing I find very curious about this, and we won't know how much it has an impact until we see the game, is I think it's really on an occasion like this, it would be really easy to separate your support for the players from your desire for Stan Kroenke, your vocal desire for Stan Kroenke to leave the club, and that's not going to happen today. At come 8 o'clock or 7:30 or whatever time it is, the police will say, "I'm sorry, there's a game on now. You need to move away." And believe me, they don't like people hanging around the Emirates for these behind closed doors games. And how much does that filter through? How much do the players feel the atmosphere before the hostility that's not aimed at them at all, but that is engulfing the ground? I don't know the answer to that. I think it will, in a purely footballing terms, I think it will make it harder for the players to perform, which isn't the issue and shouldn't stop fans protesting. But it is a sort of an interesting side note.
Yeah, the interesting thing is, right, the one upshot of fans not being in the ground for the players is I can't imagine the cognitive dissonance of a home leg of a semifinal European tie with chants of "we want Kroenke out," dominating the ground. And it'd be wonderful to hear and be broadcast to millions of people, certainly, and it would send the message. But, then you have the question of how it impacts the players. So, Tim, and James, you know what, just to be sensitive of your time, why don't I let you go here, and we can hopefully have you on the pod if you'd be so kind to join us.
Would be my honor. Congratulations. I mean, you guys do some of the best work in the industry.
Too kind, as do you. And,
why
I imagine, look, James, it has to be said that for a guy who works for a network that has broadcast rights for the Champions League, maybe a sigh of relief as well for you this week.
Oh, yeah, Monday was a really, really worrying day.
Well, you know what? I think we can all agree that we are happy for you and for football, primarily for football, but for you as well, my friend. Thanks very much.
Thanks.
All right, James is on Twitter at James Benge, and certainly read all his great stuff. It's fantastic. We'll talk to James again in the future, hopefully, now that I know he actually wants to talk to us, so that's a good thing to hear. All right, Tim, you've been a match-going fan for years and years and years and years and years and hadn't missed more than 1 or 2 games in a decade before the pandemic. You have a connection with the club that is very much about the sense of community, the sense of brotherhood and the match going experience. How do you feel hearing ownership create this division, saying, oh, well, the local fans want this and the global fans want that? And I mean, is that sort of a slap in the face, just not because you're more important of a fan, but just the idea that there are different types of fans and that they need to be serviced in different ways? Or is that just the reality now?
I don't regard it as a slap in the face, because I just don't think Josh Kroenke really knows what he's talking about. And look, no one's Twitter timeline is completely and utterly representative, but I'm not really seeing that divide that cleanly. I think that's a gross oversimplification. And the scenes I'm seeing tonight, it was interesting, your conversation there with James, in that this is really unique in that thousands of people are coming together, but they can't go into the ground, which I think is quite a unique dynamic. And also, and I hope this doesn't sound like not a criticism, but dismissive of the protests, but actually this is the first opportunity Arsenal fans have had to come together in their hundreds and maybe even thousands for over a year. And I don't doubt that on a nice sunny day in London and a kind of, this isn't like the Wenger out protests. That was divisive because there were plenty of people who did not want to see that. Even people who wanted to see Arsene Wenger leave didn't want to see protests. It was very divisive and dicey. This is, I can't say it's unanimous. Nothing is unanimous really, but I mean, it's close, this doesn't divide us.
And I think
this issue of ownership.
I've seen the polls saying that it's something like 80 or 90%, which is as close as unanimous as we're going to get in this modern era.
Yeah. Well, go ahead. Sorry, Tim. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I think there's a lot of that going into it, but at the same time, it makes me really proud, actually. And you talked about that sense of brotherhood, sisterhood, whatever. I see it there. I really see it. And actually, I haven't seen a lot of it at Arsenal over maybe the last 7-8 years, maybe even 10 years. But I see it today, and that's great. And it's a shame it's over something like this, but at the same time, it's absolutely necessary, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, Scott, I it's funny, right? I don't have a problem saying to Tim, "Hey, Tim, your way of connecting to the fan, to the club, is different from my way of connecting to the club, and that your ability to be physically present gives you a perspective that I don't have and a commitment that I don't have." There's this weird inability to just recognize and admit that we're at a remove geographically that kind of changes the way we interact with the club. But I think the gamble that the club took is that somehow we don't want the same things. And what they've maybe completely missed in all this is global fan, domestic fan, match-going fan, fan that watches from halfway around the world. It is the culture of football and its unique qualities that have drawn us to it. I didn't get drawn to Arsenal and football because I want more of the American sports experience. I want less of it and more of this. So do you think they just totally miscalculated, thinking that the global fan did have different interests? And to any extent, do you think they're right, or do you think they just totally misjudged it?
I mean, I think, again, this is something that came in their bubble where they didn't really have a lot of outside perspectives. But yeah, I think this is just the introduction of a Super League is such a huge, drastic change from what we all grew up, why we wanted to become, fans, I suppose. I mean, that is something that it's such a different way of having things run. It's completely different. And it's not to say that one is bad or worse. It's just, this is a completely different thing. Is, I'm American. I love American sports, but it's a completely different model. And I don't, it seems really weird to really kind of force that on there. And, I think people coming and trying to force kind of those changes on American sports would be met with a very similar kind of upheaval that I don't think people would, want to necessarily see things like that. And it is kind of, I guess, I'm not struggling to find the right word here, but it's very jarring to see these kind of changes introduced to the sports, because, sports are not rational. And it's like, why we like these things isn't because we, are coming from a rational place a lot of times when we're doing these things. So making, drastic changes to why we like things is going to cause these sort of outcomes. And it is really weird to me that they didn't really even think about that. Because I mean, that's definitely one of the things when I think about why did I become a fan of Premier League. So, we have the MLS here, and, there's those kinds of things. I could have really kind of gone into that, but it does have a special culture, the history, the pyramid to me is actually one of the really kind of the coolest things about it. And really kind of just trying to divorce that of it is something that really kind of just kills the overall feel of the game for me.
Yeah.
Can I
please come
can
back.
I come in on that and possibly really I'm kind of saying this tongue in cheek, right? But maybe to Americanize this slightly. What you're saying is like and I promise I mean that tongue in cheek. But what you're kind of saying is like the Premier League has like, it's a brand that has a story, right? And this is what we were talking about, Elliot, on the pod the other day. Like the Super League, they didn't try to tell a story with it. They were just like, here's the Super League, here's the best teams, brilliant. And like, the Premier League is similar, like to the Super League. It was a breakaway. It was about revenue. It was about closing off some of the revenue. But they told a story with it. Like it had a kind of, look, we will improve the stadiums, which were crappy at that point, and we'll bring like the best overseas players in. Like at the time, Serie A had all the best overseas players. We'll do that. We'll improve the stadiums. We'll like have more football on TV. Like it told a story. The Super League tells no story whatsoever. Personally, I think there should be a European Super League, probably. I think that's kind of fine. That is the way the wind is blowing. But there's a way to do it. And the way to do that is not to put out a statement at midnight in the UK on a Sunday and say, here's the Super League, everyone. Bye. Like they didn't try to tell a story.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's fair, Scott. It sounds like you got a thought on that. Yeah,
and I mean, I think one of the things too is like, I guess the Premier League kind of almost feels like an evolution where this is such a drastic change that it's, the total kind of, disregard, like the openness to those 5 teams was such an afterthought. Like, it's like, how did those people get picked? I don't know. Like they didn't, it's like, there's no sort of like anything like that. So it was, this is what we're doing. It's so self-serving, which, not to say the Premier League, breakaway wasn't self-serving to the teams that got all the extra money, but at least it seemed a little bit more, thought through, and, it's still going to be part of the overall pyramid and those kinds of things. And and you can definitely see why the Super League is here, because there's certainly problems in European football. There's the inequality between the leagues. There's inequality inside of the leagues, where, it really is hurting things, I think, going in there. But I don't think this was necessarily the solution to how to fix this. And there is probably something that needs to be done. And, I think, Tim, I'm agreeing with you that I think that there is probably a Super League is right, but I think it needs to sit on top of things instead of being kind of like a replacement for like the Champions League. Or I think there's a lot of better ways to think through how to implement it than what this actually happened.
Yeah, look, here's the other thing, right? Like, and maybe this is me particularly. I love the squad building debates, and I love talking about how we get back to the top. I like wondering how we figure this out. Who should we hire to replace Edu if he should go? And what do we think of the manager? And, what players should we sign? And once you give a club all the resources to the point where their advantage over the opposition is so great as to be insurmountable, It's a rescue ladder. It's a bailout. And if there's one thing billionaires love, it's a bailout. This is a bailout from having to solve the footballing problems. But for me, that's uninteresting. You know, Manchester City, I'm sure their fans love it. Let's be honest. But that's uninteresting to me. How to beat a bunch of clubs that don't have a fraction of the resources as you, isn't that interesting? And I realize that, you know, as an Arsenal fan, we have many, many times the resources of many other clubs. And that is a problem that trickles down throughout top flight football. But Tim, in terms of what this Super League thing would mean, I think the one thing for me that is clear that it is long-term the death of domestic competition. And then you run into the question of like, what are the reasons people tune into games? And, you know, we do have to reckon with the fact that if Arsenal were to play Barca tonight, there'd be more viewers than Arsenal playing Everton. If we were to play Bayern Munich next week, there'd be more viewers than if we were to play Sheffield United. What is the role of scarcity in driving popularity? You and I got into a really interesting conversation on our Patreon pod the other night about there's Twitch now and YouTube now and TikTok now and social media and there's Netflix and there's everything is on all the time. And football is not just competing for the eyeballs, you know, against other sports. They're competing against all of this other content. So to what extent does scarcity create monoculture? Like is playing Bayern once a year going to get you more eyeballs than playing Bayern once a month? What is the role of scarcity in driving the interest in these big events?
That's really interesting because I've completely forgotten which sport it is. I read about that. It's like, you know, because you know how like baseball, for example, has gone like completely the other way in terms of just having like 1 million games a year, and it's just like baseball. And I can't remember which sport it is, or even if it was an American sport that went completely the other way and just went for that exact scarcity model. You know, it's like, right, there aren't going to be 1 million games a year, but when they're on, there's going to be like 50 million viewers or whatever. And obviously, I think you can't put that genie back in the bottle with football now. Football has set its path. It's going more on like the baseball path, right? And this is a problem that I don't see a solution to, and I don't see that these owners that tried to put together this Super League have any other response than let's just put loads more football on. And it's exactly that. And so, you know, to the conversation we had about like, yeah, Arsenal, loads of people tune in or go to Arsenal Barcelona. When Arsenal play Barcelona at the Emirates, every single seat is full. But if we play Barcelona twice a season, that stops becoming the case because there's no scarcity. But so I agree that scarcity drives that kind of value. I don't know which kind of model makes more sense economically. Whether do you have Arsenal Barca like twice a year? And therefore, you know, maybe you get 80% full stadia, etc., etc. And if you just do that perpetually, does that get more eyeballs than doing it once every 4 or 5 years? Like which one? Like I don't honestly know the answer to that. But at the beginning of your question, the thing I was really thinking of, you know, the things that you were interested in, things that don't interest you. The thing I was thinking of, right, is I don't watch any American sports. I used to watch NBA when I was younger, but the time zone thing became prohibitive and I stopped playing. Like I played basketball when I was younger, and then I realized I wasn't going to be 6'8", and I stopped. And so I used to really enjoy NBA. But anyway, don't watch any American sports. And but the thing that really that came to my mind was like I read Moneyball and I watched the movie like twice, maybe 3 times. Really, really interested in that story. I haven't watched the Manchester City documentary because I don't care. Because I watched the Tottenham one, right? Didn't watch Man City. Didn't watch the Juventus documentary. I don't care about like it's not an interesting story. We spent the most money. We won the league. Well done, brilliant. Whereas like the Moneyball story, even though it's a sport that I don't watch and don't really have a clue about. That really captured my imagination. And I know that's on like a really maybe like finite, ridiculous scale because that is one of the greatest and most unlikely sporting stories ever. But do you know what I mean? Like that, even in a sport I don't like, that story grabbed me much more than Man City spent all the money and won the league. And that's and that's the kind of thing that drives interest. And so that's one of the interesting things, right? One of the drivers of this is also Leicester winning the Premier League. Hugely unlikely, a one-off event. The kind of story that really makes the Premier League quite brilliant, but the kind of story that would have made these owners go, yeah, we can't have that happening again. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Well, one of the things, Scott, that I wonder is all right, so here's what really aggravates me. This whole sport is run in a way that makes it difficult for these owners to be able to watch their asset appreciate and make a profit. But that's not what this sport was about initially, obviously, and that's not what brought people into it. And that ownership model is a relatively new model. It used to just be a custodial model. We're never going back to that. So I'm wondering how you find owners, because, I mean, unless you want to get into sports washing and oligarchs, how do you find owners who are comfortable owning a club with the understanding that the model is not set up for them to draw profits from the club? And I think that's where I'm torn. And by the way, that's not because I feel for them or I feel bad for them, but I worry that the only owners that don't care, the sports washing owners, right? The Sheikh Mansours, the Roman Abramovich, the oligarchs, the money laundering, whatever you want to say. Like, if their motivation is other than profit, fine. But how do you bring owners into a sport if the structure of the sport is designed to undermine an ability to be profitable? I want to be cognizant of saying, Kroenke out, let's get this guy out, and then say, all right, well, how do we find someone that we would really genuinely want in?
Yeah, I mean, I think you look at it, especially with the asset prices the way they are, the pool of actual owners that could take over a team is really, really small. I mean, you basically have nation states, private equity, and maybe, the top 100 richest people in the world. And that's probably about it, especially for, a club the size of Arsenal, which is probably, I haven't looked at the latest, Forbes rating, but it's probably $3 billion, $2.8 billion, something like that. And so you're not talking about, your local, rich guy anymore. You're talking about, it has to be a worldwide rich guy now. And, so that makes it really hard. And I think, that's one of the things that I think you kind of look at in the Premier League right now. I think there's a number of teams that you could probably go and say are for sale, but at the asking prices for what the owners want out of their clubs, the actual people that can do that is very, very small. And, I don't think that we'd be especially happy with a lot of them. So, I mean, it's a tough one. I don't know what the actual solution is. It's just, we are in a problem right now, and I don't know what there is to do.
Yeah, I mean, that is really the issue. The lineup is apparently out. So one thing that we will do is talk a little football. So just real quick, we'll continue to cover the protest. We'll continue to cover our reaction to what's happened this week. But I do want to get to the semifinal that's coming up. I want to get to the game tonight against Everton. I mean, Tim, just real quick before we post the lineup and get into that, we're in a really weird situation, right? Because unlike maybe some of these other big clubs that were in the Super League, our league season is basically dead, which means Stan is confronting the possibility that every game we have, or at least every home fixture we have in the league for the rest of the season, is just a chance for people to voice their expression of dissatisfaction with him. Now, you could say that would be the case even if we were contending for something, but there might be a distraction. How do you regard the fact that right now, given that our league season is essentially dead, we are in the position to really make it very uncomfortable every match day from now till the end of the season, and especially if there's a game at the end of the season where they allow fans into the ground?
Yeah, absolutely. That absolutely is in play. I mean, again, I hope this doesn't sound dismissive about the protest, because I really, really, really don't want that to be the case. But we're definitely over 1,000 people there, right? There's a picture there at the moment, and I think we can safely say we're in four figures for this protest. Those people aren't going to be able to see the game tonight, right? Because you can't just go in the pub and go and watch it at 8 o'clock. So all of these people, and I mean this as a compliment, if anything, all of these people have decided they're not watching the game tonight, basically, to go and do this protest. And so perhaps if there was more riding on this, would that shave some off the numbers? I think it certainly would. And again, that's not a criticism. I'm not there. So that's absolutely not a criticism, but it absolutely does. It absolutely does. And don't get me wrong, I think this will be like the peak of it, but then like it will depend on results. If we lose like the next couple of league games, which if we're rotating the team, we might, then that's just going to build it even more and even more. And frankly, I think it should. Like I think it's time. It is absolutely time for this. We are united on this, and ultimately, isn't the fact that our league games have nothing riding on them, that is the absolute encapsulation of the decline of this club. The fact that we are in mid-table in April, and therefore our games mean nothing. That is exactly like that is the Cronkies. Well, whether they probably don't regard it as their problem, but that is the problem with the Cronkies. This has happened on their watch. We have become a mid-table team on their watch. So I think if that does indeed happen, and it could happen, I think that's absolutely appropriate. I don't think this will happen for the Villarreal game, personally. I mean, I don't know. Maybe it will, because that's a kind of bigger game. But yeah, so Brighton on the 23rd of May, as it stands in UK law, there will be 10,000 Arsenal fans allowed into that game. And I imagine that there will be something coordinated. And what we're seeing here is a real unity on this issue. This is not the Wenger out protests where 50% of people not just didn't want it, but vehemently didn't want it. This is not a split here. So the 10,000 people that get into that Brighton game, I'm sure there'd be something arranged.
Tim, I think we at least have to applaud Stan Kroenke for his ability to bring
us
the
together.
fan base together. I mean, there's just nothing like it. And look, I do want to say, if you're watching this on the other side of the pond from me, like where Tim is, and you feel an antipathy towards America and Americans for this, I'm going to say something. I hear you. I get it. Because it's hard to divorce the fact that the person you feel that's ruining your club and the model that you feel that's being mooted to ruin your club is viewed as an American model and is an American person. And one thing I see some fights about is like, oh, don't blame us. We're not, it's not all Americans. I think deep down everybody knows who the culprit is. So like, if you can't help but have a little antipathy towards the place where the guy comes from and the model, the place where the model comes from, so be it. We'll all get over it. We'll all be friends. We'll all love each other again as Arsenal fans. I get it. We know who the common enemy is. I think there's just a lot of ridiculousness here. And Scott, one thing before we move on and talk a little bit of football, I got into it with people because you got to be careful about giving ground. And the move that I think still sticks out to me is in the middle of a pandemic when the PR was maximum. Clubs were suffering. The stadium were closed. There was no football. And other clubs were sort of taking stock of what to do. What did KSE do? They rammed through a wage deferment. They rammed through the ability to pull money back from the players. And I get it, saying boo-hoo the players. But you know what? Not every player is Mesut Ozil or Aubameyang. There are young kids. There are 18-year-olds there trying to make their way in what could be a very short career. Maybe they won't make it at Arsenal and they won't make as much money when they go down the table. And they're watching now Stan have to fork out money to JP Morgan for getting out of this 48-hour catastrophe. It is so typical for him to leverage that situation in the PR, that situation to pull money back from the players, but now he's crying poor. And my attitude is like, this is why you just don't give an inch. Because at the end of the day, he's got the millions to waste on a contract he just breached after 48 hours of fan pressure. So does this kind of give you a moment to kind of rethink some of the moves that have been made along the way and say, I'm sorry, this is unforgivable. And that move in particular looks so nakedly greedy, and the redundancies and all of that in the context of what he's now gone and done.
Yeah, and I think this is something where the players are definitely second thoughts in all of this. A lot of the things that was coming out of it is, the cost controls. So we're only going to spend 55% of revenues on players and transfers. I mean, that's a naked, thing where we're trying to cut costs on here. Even Bayern Munich, who wasn't for this, is, pushing for that. So if I'm looking at this from a player's perspective, I'm definitely nervous about these things. I think the other thing too is, even with the new UEFA Champions League, just extra games on top of all of these things. And it seems that's what UEFA, that's what FIFA are all adding. It's just the length of the season for a lot of these players is just getting crazy. And it's not like they're going to get, an extra, 20% because we're playing an extra 20% of, matches. And I think that's something that is really, if I was going to be a player, like I'd be very nervous about a lot of these things. And I think this also goes back to Tim's point about scarcity. We're adding more and more games, and they're not necessarily important games. So I think that's another thing that there's more teams playing all the time. There's not a particular window. I think that was one of the things that I actually really liked about it when the Premier League started, is like there was maybe like 3 time slots on a weekend. You had your really early one, you had your 7 a.m. kickoff, and then there was kind of an afternoon one, and that was kind of it. Now it's like all day, and it's like it's really hard to make that commitment to try to watch all of the games and do those things. And it's like I think there is been just that too much of that switch to there's too much football on all the time, and it's just maybe not as special. There's too many games, I think, that we're going to, and again, like it's we're ruining maybe the special European nights, because that's going to be every midweek now, kind of a thing. So I think that is a little too much of going in the oversupply part and making things less special. And I think we're hurting the quality of the matches by having too many of these. I think if I was a player, I'd be very worried about getting our share of because they're the ones that are actually providing the value. So we're coming in to watch them. So I think that's something that, I can be a super capitalist, but man, I want that money to go to them. I don't want to see it go to the billionaire owners that own the club. I want it to go towards the players that are actually providing the value for things. So I think there's a lot of issues that are still needing to be addressed. And I think that, you could definitely see that they didn't get the actual stakeholders in trying to make these plans, because I don't think that the players would have been happy if this went through.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I agree with every word you said. And I think ultimately now what we should do is shift the conversation a little bit to football. And so, Scott, obviously not your strong suit, so we'll let you go here. I'm kidding. But we do have to bring other people on. So that's Scott's on Twitter at @O_that_hab. We'll talk to you soon on the pod.
That's right.
Thanks, bud. Talk to you soon. All right, that's Scott. Hey, Tim, real quick. Lineup is out. And before we say goodbye to you and be talking to you hopefully on the Instant Reaction Pod, Nketiah gets to start up front. I think that's really the thing everyone was looking for. I don't have a problem with it because I regard this game as meaningless, but do you regard that as an audition for Thursday?
Quite possibly, although I do think they'll bring Aubameyang back for Thursday anyway. So maybe it's not an audition for him, but maybe it's a kind of, look, we're playing with the low-touch striker who just wants to get in the penalty area again. And that's what I'm interested in, because obviously he's a very different type to Lacazette. It looks like with Xhaka at left-back, we're going to play the same system, but we're not having that striker dropping in and connecting play and things like that. We're having that more Aubameyang-style striker. He's going to get in the area, so your job is to get the ball in the area so that he can do something with it. And that's the thing I'm interested in and maybe a little bit worried about as well. I would have played Martinelli up front myself.
Yeah, same.
But
what about Pepe up front?
Yeah. I think it. Honestly, I think it's worth a go, but I still would have had that maybe as third behind Martinelli and Nketiah, maybe even Balogun.
Yeah, I mean, I think that could have worked as well. Look, Eddie Nketiah is a really nice guy. He's been phenomenal at youth level, and I think he's someone who can secure a decent fee for us. I don't see him having a huge future, especially with Balogun re-signing. I don't know that I want to go to a European semifinal with him leading the line. I would have loved to have seen Martinelli or Pepe get a chance here, because having not done it for us in a big spot, it would have been a chance to audition them. But maybe, just maybe, it means that Aubameyang just being kept out one more game, ready to go on Thursday. That'll be our hope. Because did he return to training? Is that right? I thought I saw.
He's light training at the moment, so hoping to come into full. If he's in full training by Wednesday, I think he starts.
Yeah, I agree with you. Okay, so we'll let you go. I'm going to bring Jess in here for a second. So, well, first I'll let you say hello to Jess. So you can find her on Twitter at Jessica Black and on the She Knows Arsenal podcast. Hello, Jessica.
Hey, how are you guys?
Good to see you. Say goodbye to Tim.
Bye, Tim.
Bye, Jess. And Cronky out.
Yeah, there you go. Tim's on Twitter at Stoberto. Cronky out. Well, you know what? Who cares if you say his name right? Indeed. That's Tim. Okay, we'll get more from Tim on a future podcast, obviously. And so, Jessica, hello. Welcome. Good to talk to you.
I know. Good to talk to you too. Let's melt down over the lineup. I mean,
we can do that. Just real quick before we melt down over the lineup, any just quick thoughts on the scenes outside the stadium?
Yeah, for me, it's I think it's a good first start, or first time trying to make our voices heard. I think the Super League announcement or whatever they were trying to do really ignited the fan base and gave the fan base something to unite over, which is a good thing. I don't necessarily feel like this is what's going to get Kroenke out, but I don't care about that. For a long time, it's like there was a sense of apathy with the fan base. It was just like all is lost, whatever. Now it seems like the fans are awake and ready to fight. So now it's up to the fan groups and people with big followings that feel the same way as the fans to get together and devise a plan to try to make things change. I don't know if the Kroenkes will ever sell, but maybe we can shoot for some changes and put enough pressure on them where they'll kind of think about what they've done and make better decisions, because that's important. If they're going to own the club, we want them to make better decisions and not take us into this half-baked, Super League thing, without consulting the fans or thinking about what we want. They tried to take advantage of the fact that we weren't in stands. Now they see us outside of the Emirates making a fuss. I mean, look at that, so I think at the very least, I'd like to see them just think twice before they make decisions like this. And movements like protesting is important. It's not the end, it's the beginning. And I'm just happy to see a bunch of fans out there, making their voices heard.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. Look, these are incredible scenes that we're seeing. It almost feels silly that there's going to be football played tonight, but there is. So let's talk a little bit about the football, and we'll come back to some of these scenes in a moment. Jess, the lineup is, I mean, it's to me the strong first choice lineup with two notable exceptions. Odegaard is not in there because he's not available, and Aubameyang is not in there because he's not available. Odegaard is on the bench, Aubameyang is not. It makes it touch and go for what's going to happen Thursday. And while this lineup today is not super important, the lineup choices for the semifinal are super important. Mm-hmm. I hope that we will get Odegaard on for Ceballos at some point tonight, only because I'd like to see, can he play that role? Or, maybe Smith Rowe then shifts into the Ceballos role and Odegaard comes over, because changing a lot of things going into the semifinal is scary. It may be the case that he just won't pick Odegaard Thursday because he's got something that he feels kind of good with and he's going to try to stick with it. But it is all about that striker position. And Eddie Nketiah is not a bad player, but I think how little he's played shows you where he is in the pecking order right now. I would love to see Martinelli play there. I would love to see Pepe play there. We're not going to get that tonight, and so that leads me to think we're not going to get it on Thursday. Do you think this is Nketiah's job now to take into Thursday night, and how do you feel about that?
I mean, every opportunity a player gets should be an opportunity to try to make a case for the next game. You don't want to take that away just because you may be thinking that that player's not going to be here. So I would hope that if Nketiah had a good game, that he would be in contention for that spot. I don't think any of us really, that's what we want to see. I anticipate Aubameyang being fit enough to play in Thursday's game. It's too important not to have one of your better strikers. And if it's not Lacazette, it needs to be Aubameyang. And for me, if it's not Aubameyang, it kind of needs to be Martinelli. But I would like to see Nketiah just have a good game, score maybe a goal or two, and just drive his price up, to be honest. So but I don't think he's really fighting for a place for Thursday. I just think that it has to feel that way for him to give a good performance. His last couple performances, I know that he scored a goal the last time he played, but they haven't been great. So I don't care if you're going to be here for the next couple of years or for the next 5 minutes. I want to see you do well. So hopefully Eddie can have a good performance today.
Yeah, well said. Well, guess who we know is going to have a good performance today, Jess?
Thomas.
No, someone else.
Pepe?
Nope, someone else.
Chambers.
Nope, someone else. I'll put it to you this way. It's a man who never had a bad performance.
Who's never
a man who always delivers, who is sharp. Clive, oh my God, it's Clive. You can find him on Twitter, Clive PAFC. Clive's here. Oh, Clive's here. Oh, it's Clive. It's Clive.
Don't use Jess. Don't follow him.
Clive.
Don't follow him.
Thank you, Clive.
I'm excited as
Oh my
well.
God, it's Clive.
Let's talk
OMG,
about
it's Clive.
football.
It's Clive. It's Clive.
Yeah.
Clive, they love you. Oh, it's Clive. Oh, Regatron air horn noise. I don't know how to do one of those. Clive, and I'll never do that again. Okay, Clive, my man. How are you?
I'm good. I'm
Good.
set up okay. I've rushed my setup, and so I was a bit late. But, there you go. We all good?
We are good. Of course we're good. Oh, see, we were about to lose some people, but not with Clive here. So let me do this, Clive. We got to get your take on these scenes happening right now outside the Emirates. Before we are going to talk football, we're going to talk lineup, we're going to talk semifinal coming up as well. But Clive, just a quick thought on the people who are making their voices. And again, look, I'm not going to pretend that Stan Kroenke's watching this and going, gosh, I got to sell. Who knows what he's thinking? And I think maybe we can touch on the fact that we haven't actually heard from Stan at all. He wasn't on the message when they announced the Super League. He wasn't on the message when they jumped out of the Super League. And he wasn't at the fan forum. So he's not been a part of this at all, which is really super convenient for him. But what do you think of the fans turning out and making themselves heard today?
Yeah, I think it's great. And hey, look, I'm not a revolutionist. I'm a football man, right? So I think sometimes I'm not somebody who's going to be an expert in every single thing, right? I just love my football.
All evidence to the contrary, but sure, go for it.
And I want to see the club compete. That's what I really want. That's what I want. And what's become really apparent to me is that these guys have been taking the middle of the road, and they're happy in the middle of the road, and they don't care about how we feel. So every week we do 2 to 3, maybe 4 podcasts a week, talking about lineups, about selection, about different players, different departments, how we build squads, our transfer policy, everything that a fan loves about the game. And we talk about these things, and the guys at the top are just happy for us not to be relegated, waiting for this moment. So rather than look at the sporting element of the club to try to build the asset by our sporting merit and performance, they want to use the history of which they play little or no part in creating a bigger history to promote us up the sporting world. Now, and that's because of the 40, 50 million Arsenal fans around the world that keep our club relevant, that pour lots of data around the interwebs to make sure we're one of the most relevant clubs in the world, probably top 5 in the world for traffic, for data. This is what creates this club. This is what creates this club. That's nothing to do with these owners. And they're rather than build on that to make it even better and bigger and realize the size of the club we are, we'll focus on batting down the middle and then focus on using our political might to move us up the sporting echelons that way. And I think that's unforgivable. Excuse me. I think that's unforgivable. And the reason why
Gets you choked up, man. I can understand that. Me too.
I've been really upset this week. I couldn't come on last night.
I know.
I couldn't come on last night. I was afraid what I might say. Right? I was afraid what I might say, and I just couldn't do it. I couldn't physically do it. And but I just think back, right? Just think back to the first year we got to Europa League final. We got to January, and the message was no money, just loans. Remember?
Mm-hmm.
We got Denis Suarez in, who was a broken body. We ended up missing out on the Champions League by 1 point. By 1 point, got to the final, got slapped. A good foresight owner would think, you know what? Let's invest, because we get to the Champions League, I get 100 million. By not spending the 12 million on, say, Christopher Nkunku, we miss out on the Champions League, and here we are 2-3 years later, still scrambling around. And then when we get pushed to a Super League, people question our status. That really annoys me. We need to be focused on being a football club. We need an owner with sporting ambition. Well, I want an owner with sporting ambition. That's what I really want, because this is a sport. This is a sport that I want to see us get better on. I want to see us earn our position. I want to see us organically grow. with a similar investment that our competitive landscape is getting. Nothing more. I don't mind a little bit less, but something that allows us to compete on a fair, level playing ground, so we can be judged, just like Man United are judged, like Chelsea are judged, like City are judged, like Spurs and Leicester are judged. They've all had investment. West Ham had investment. Everyone's had investment apart from us. And we're sitting there criticising our club because we've got idiots at centre-backs for the last 5 years, and we don't invest to get them out of the building. We don't even try. We let them walk out of the building for nothing. That's sort of how you operate in a sporting way. I'll never forgive them for that. I'll never forgive them for the Monday mornings I've had pain, the Friday mornings I've had pain. I'll never forgive them because they didn't even try. They didn't even try. And I think that is unforgivable.
Yeah, I think that's fair. A quick question for you, and then we'll get to football. If you had been at the fan forum, is there a question you would have liked to have asked that maybe you didn't hear answered, or just something that's on your mind that you would have wanted to express?
I've got loads of things in my mind, and I've got loads. Yeah. I'm almost scared to say some of them, right? So I think the fan can only react as that person can, as an individual can. I have given you my reaction and what I like in a football club ownership and what I like in a club. And some fans who are really more sort of opinionated, they want to get interaction. They want to help. I mean, we all want this club to be better, didn't we? I heard one of the guys on the forum, his name's Peter. He said, we want to help you. Mm-hmm. We don't want you to make these mistakes and drag our reputation down. We want to help. We're happy to have a meeting with you offline to sort of make sure you don't do this stuff. Do you see what I mean? Never disrespect another man's brain or process and how they look at football. I never do. We can't always be the same. But they're so arrogant they couldn't even reach out. I know there may be confidentiality things, but are you telling me that people at that club couldn't reach out to some trusted members of the press, trusted members of the fan base, trusted members of the podcast world who would hold these things, because it's too important, to just find out, to help position the club? No. Again, they don't want to do that. I say I'm not one of these fan forum guys, but I tell you, I respect them for their love for the club, for their effort to try to keep the club honest. You need levels of accountability. That's not my thing, but I know them. I know Akil, I know Tim, I know them. I talk to them, and fair play to them, right? They do their thing, we do our thing, right? So they want to talk about centre mids. I'm better than them, but they're better than me at this, right? And I'm quite comfortable with that. And so I just feel if I was able to talk to them, I would just say, hey, there's some really educated people out there who are Arsenal fans. Please, please, please don't underestimate your fan base. I actually feel, I'm going now, you got me going, right? I actually feel, I don't think they know what they've got here at the club. I've always said this. I don't think they understand the size, the monster of the club they have. And if they ever lent into that, we would just explode. We would explode, and with success, we would just explode, and they just don't get it.
The problem is they don't want to innovate. I said this earlier. These, unfortunately, we're in a moment now where if you're a billionaire, you have two ways you can increase your wealth. You can consolidate or you can regulate. You can lobby the government to create rules that make it easier for you to amass wealth and harder for others, or you can consolidate by buying out or freezing out your competition. Facebook buys Instagram, right? Instagram creates stories to get rid of Snapchat's features, right? You see this going on. Or the billionaires create regulatory hurdles that keep competition out. Or in this case, create a super league so you don't have to compete, so you don't have to innovate. I'm not an NBA fan, but my God, NBA Twitter is fun as hell. You ever watch that thing? It's all video clips and highlights and stuff. What happens if you post a highlight of a Premier League game? Your account gets taken down. They want to control it because they don't know how to use the digital world. They don't realize that we could be 100 million marketers all sharing their product, sharing clips with their sponsors in it, sharing clips of their shirt that says Emirates fly better or says Adidas on it. They don't want that because they don't understand that. They don't understand the digital age. And the irony is, you look at, any of these digital marketers that are out there, you guys, whether it's YouTube channels that, actually are successful and like ours or whatever the case may be, there are people out there that understand. Look at how many viewers the watch along on AFTV gets. 500,000. I mean, these are just some guys that are fans of the club that said, "Hey, let's throw a video on YouTube," and they understand this new audience in a way the club isn't even interested in understanding. Sorry, Clive. Yeah. And Jess, I'll bring you back in a second. I promise.
I think there's been a lot of outpouring because when you go through something emotional like this, people they just give you what they feel, and that's absolutely fine. But I heard John Barnes say something, and it stayed with me all week actually. He said, everyone's saying that these owners have got to understand us. They've got to understand the soul of the game, all the rest of it. And he said, actually, it's the other way around. I think football needs to understand billionaires. And I thought, that's genius, right? Because they're in the room. We haven't been smart enough to have safeguarding rules to stop us from coming in the room. They are in the room. Mm-hmm. So now they're in the room. We better understand them. We better build a relationship with them. We better reset. We better use the opportunity to reset the relationship we have with them because they own our club. And everyone used to pine for David Dean and all the old board. Well, they sold the club to this lot, and they're off spending their money. David Dean put 333,000 into the club, walked away with 80 million. Right? So don't look back and think it was better. Everyone's after their money. They're in the room now. No government legislation is going to stop them from being in the room because they own the club. They bought the club on fair rules. They're in the room, and we hope we're going to use this opportunity to reset the relationship, or they go. It's one of two things. And to reset the relationship, they need to say, okay, we're going to be a football club again, not an investment vehicle. If we're a football club, we've got a chance of not getting Denis Suarez, but getting Nkunku the first time round. Do you see what I mean? As an example, and there are many others. We've got a chance of chinning Mustafi before he walks out in the free with a payoff and getting a proper centre back in. Do you see what I mean? And not suffering at Wembley like we did against Man City, not suffering against Spurs at Wembley. Why are we doing this? You're just not showing, you're not building the trust. And that's the memories I have. I have the football memories where I think we could be better. We could be better run. And the rest is, a lot of it is conjecture and what people are saying. I think I'm disappointed. I said to you earlier, I'm disappointed in myself that I didn't read billionaires properly and quickly enough. And while we were just dipping our toe in the transfer market, just changing a coach here and there, I sort of believe we were a football club, but actually we're not.
Yeah, well, let's do this. Everybody okay if we talk a little football before we wrap this up? Let's talk a little football because I think everybody could use a little bit of that. Jess, again, this isn't totally football, but it's mostly football. Has this dented your excitement for the semifinal at all? Has this impacted your ability? I mean, it is the irony of all ironies that we are facing an absolutely seismic moment in the club on the pitch. We could qualify for a competition that totally changes the livelihood, the trajectory of this club, and yet it is a competition that the club just tried to break away from. So the cognitive dissonance is huge, but for the players, they could be in the Champions League next season. Do you think they'll be able to rally themselves? That Arteta, talk about putting a first-time manager under pressure. Can he rally the team to get the requisite amount of excitement and energy for qualifying for something that the club just tried to basically rebel against?
I mean, it did dent my excitement. I mean, just a couple of days ago, it was like, are we even going to be in this competition? Does anything even matter? A lot of people were saying, well, does the Everton match even matter? Does anything matter? So yeah, it's hard to kind of recalibrate and get back into the mode of caring. You know, the lineup just came out and I really want to react to it. But at the same time, I'm just like, wow, there's thousands of people outside of the Emirates protesting right now and they won't even be watching the game, you know? So it is hard to get back into the groove of it. But ultimately, the Super League is done for now. I think it's going to come back in some other shape or form, but we can talk about that on another day. But as of now, it's not coming. And these players are in a very difficult moment where they have key players missing, a lot of inconsistencies, and have had a pretty rough season. But we're still in the semifinals of the Europa League. And as Elliot has already said, we can get into the Champions League. So we need to, as a fan base, be able to prioritize and compartmentalize things as well. We need to get behind our players and make sure that we're putting as much effort into the protesting and stuff as we, to also push them forward, because they're going to need us. They've been distracted. It's unfortunate. The distractions that they've went through has been absolutely unnecessary. I can't imagine what they've been through the last couple of days, feeling like football for them, they grew up in a world where football is similar to us. So they're true football fans. You know, I know that maybe some of them like the Super League. That's neither here nor there. We need to be behind them. And I'm not quite sure this would be the perfect kind of out for them in a way, in my mind, if they just were unable to concentrate, because this has been such a distraction, you know. But Arteta has to galvanize this group and get them ready. And I think having Everton before the Villarreal game is a good kind of benchmark to see where we are mentally moving into the Villarreal game. So if we go out there today and we completely just capitulate, then we know that Arteta needs to go even harder to get them more concentrated. But I wouldn't be surprised if these guys went out here and just, you know, were like zombies. You know, most of the six, when they went out for those first couple 20 minutes, they were dead. And I wouldn't be surprised if that wasn't because they were thinking about the Super League. So this has been detrimental and damaging in multiple ways. But for the players, it's been probably horrific for them.
Yeah, and cheers to everybody, by the way. I know these are tricky times, so we raise a glass. Clive already on the red. It's not late enough here for me to be on the red, but I assure you that'll be happening eventually. Jess, I'll stick with you for one more question then. It is... You could argue that we are in an advantage position in that we have league fixtures that don't really matter, and then we've got the Europa League that really does. But turning it off and turning it on again can be hard, and especially in light of the news that's come up. You look at the lineup we put out, and aside from Ceballos, who's in there due to injury, and Nketiah, who's in there due to injury, it is what is now, kind of shockingly, with respect to certain things like Xhaka at left back and Chambers at right back, probably a first-choice lineup. If you're Arteta, are you shifting gears? I mean, we play Friday then Thursday, so maybe not so much this time. But Jess, would you be looking to really, really heavily rotate away from playing anybody important between the Europa League games now? I mean, is it really time to get serious about protecting players?
I think we have this conversation about prioritization versus chemistry and continuity every single week, because pretty much the league has been kind of out of sight for a long period of time. But I don't think this team can risk the continuity and chemistry that they've been growing over the last couple of games. I just don't think that they can do the heavily rotated. It just doesn't work. They need a run of games where they're playing well. And so I think Arteta values continuity more as well, because he doesn't heavily rotate. And when he has, it hasn't went well. So for me, I would actually stay away from prioritization and trying to make sure that we don't let players get injured. I would just say risk versus reward. See who's in the red zone, use the physio's best judgment. And if they can play the best players, play the people that work well together, and try to get some chemistry and something going, because the last couple of days have just been so out of the ordinary. These guys really need to get back into the groove. So I wouldn't even be looking to really just take our best players out of the firing line. And that's unfortunate, because we know there's a lot of minutes in ESR and Saka's legs, but we just have to go with our best team every single game as much as possible. And in my opinion, that's what I would do. I know you're Whiskers and you're worrying and all that kind of stuff.
That's why they call me Whiskers.
But I wouldn't do it. I got to go with continuity and chemistry going forward.
Yeah, one final look at the protest still going on, by the way, before we knock that out of the stream here and stick with the football, Clive. The choice of Nketiah up front tonight, I don't think there's any risk that Nketiah is now back in favor. We would have seen him play more if he was. But there's a big, big decision coming up Thursday. Aubameyang maybe could be ready, but if Aubameyang is not ready for Thursday, I think you and I have chatted about this. Pepe, Martinelli, there are other choices, but is this the night Nketiah gets to audition for a start on Thursday if it goes well for him?
Yeah, well, he's the next man up, right? So he plays. As simple as that. He's next man up, and that's why he's not played. If you're trying to put a team out there to not make him play, then you've really gone against the player. You've stopped him. If you can say to that player in January, look, Lacazette and Aubameyang are my first two, you're third. I'm sorry he didn't get many minutes, but if there's a problem with them, you'll get on. And that's what he's done. He has to play him, otherwise he's not being true to the player. If he goes out there tonight and doesn't do very well, then he can look at another option. But he's next man up. He must have an opportunity to play. He must, and that's really important. When you're a coach, you must stick to the hierarchy. that everybody knows in the dressing room. Callum Chambers was third right back a little while ago. He sat, he waited. He got his chance, he ripped it. And now he plays and no one's saying a word about him playing. You know what I mean? And that's how football is. You've gotta give people a chance. In our minds, we're probably thinking Martelli can do a good job. But where's the evidence? We've got no evidence yet. You know, and I think they'll share the game. I think he'll end up coming on. What I'm interested to see what's going to happen is what we do off the bench and who comes off the bench. That tells you the next order, the next hierarchy. I'm a bit worried about this game, I have to say. Everton are well rested. They're sitting there. If you look at the Forbes list, they're 15th on the Forbes list. AC Milan are behind them. If there's any club that should be upset about the Super League, it should be them, given their history in England, given their league wins, given what they've done historically. They've got the most to be upset about.
Do players connect with that, though? Let me just because I think this is really interesting to me, right? Like, I agree with that sentiment, but then I'm like, what does James Rodriguez care if Everton are being properly respected? You know what I mean? What does Luca Digne care, right? I mean, maybe Dominic Calvert-Lewin, but you know what I mean? Like, is that a thing that we impute to the players that maybe they just don't connect with?
Yeah. We did you see the Ancelotti interview this week? His press conference pre-game. He was fuming.
Yeah. He's got bulletin board material, right?
Yeah. So team talk time. What do you think it's going to be?
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you imagine if we get smashed 3 or 4 tonight? Embarrassing. Absolutely reputationally embarrassing. And that's why Arteta was not rotating tonight, mate. He's going out there. And I think it's really important we do something. I just want to see us rebuild our reputation as a football club. That's the most important thing. How we go about that is going to take time to work out the best processes. But we all support Arsenal Football Club. And as a football club, we've gone through a number of emotions this week. And I bet you all of us have had a little bit of embarrassment at some point this week. And that is not something that we sign up for. That is not something that we sign up for. That needs to be fixed. And I won't forget. I'm not one of these people to carry banners around. Not everyone needs to do that. It's obvious how to feel. We feel a little bit embarrassed, and that needs to be fixed because Arsenal Football Club has always had the values of doing things the right way. And they didn't this time.
No. And it is weird, right? Like, you know, in one of the WhatsApp chats I'm in with a few friends, like we talked about how no matter how bad it got for us on the pitch, you do have a sense as an Arsenal fan that you support an institution that is unique and different and special. And maybe that makes you the most naive idiot in the world. I get it. But this is the slap in the face. You know, it's like there's an age where you kind of start to figure out Santa doesn't exist, but like being slapped in the face with it, you know, it's stunning. And this really hurt, really took the wind out of my sails. Jess, Clive? Mm-hmm.
No, I was just going to say, if you, I think for me...
Fair point really, being made in the comments, by the way.
I think for me, it's not just the Super League. It's the fact that we can obviously tell that our gaze has gone away from the grass. Do you know what I mean? And our gaze has never really been on the grass. Well, and we've seen the end game. So they've been revealed for who they are. So now we've sort of been conned. Do you know what I mean? We've been conned. It's a Stephen A. Smith. Is it GIF what you kids say?
A GIF? Yep, that's it.
Yeah, I've been hoodwinked, led astray, run amok, and flat out deceived. That's how I feel. I've been hoodwinked, but we sort of haven't been hoodwinked. But to actually know you've been hoodwinked, and it's like clear. Oh man, you got some work to do, mate. You got some work to do. I'm looking at transfer rumors. That's the only thing to make me feel good. Transfer rumors. I'm looking at that. I'm looking at how you operate as a club. Start hiring good people. Stop hiring idiots that take millions out of the club and overpay on transfer fees. Stop holding on to executives that are not good enough. Stop holding on to players not good enough. Stop letting players walking out in the free, losing millions. Care about what you're doing. Care. And I've seen a little bit of that with the Edu and Arteta thing. And some people say to me, "Oh, Clive, you always give Arteta a break." Well, you know what? A coach is a coach. And no one's talking about the coach right now, are they? That tells you what a club really is. But let me tell you one thing. Yeah. Let me tell you one thing. Who do you trust in this club right now?
I mean, look, I've been on the fence about Arteta a little bit, but I certainly trust Arteta more than any of these other
I trust his motivations.
Yeah.
He's a young man in his career and he's trying to get better and he's trying to do it. The intensity by which he goes at this job is probably too much for some players, right? And they fall by the wayside. But I tell you what, I know exactly what he's trying to do. He is not hiding behind anybody. He's trying to build a better football team. And that's all I want. That's all I want. All I want to see, whoever's in that manager's chair, I want to trust them and I want them to be supported. And if these lot won't do it, then I'm literally standing with those guys virtually, standing outside the ground right now.
Yep.
That's all that matters to me.
I hear you. Jess, I want to ask you something about facing Unai Emery. But before we do that, I will mercifully solo myself here so you guys don't have to be a part of this. I don't like to disappoint viewers, and we did get asked for a Manscaped advertisement. Do you know what this is? This is it. This is the Lawnmower 3.0. Listen to that. Look, it's got a light. I don't think I've charged this thing since I got it. That's how long this battery lasts. Goes in the shower. It does. You see those? Those are ceramic blades. That's what those are. Those are ceramic. Can you believe it? Ceramic in this economy? Yes, because you get 20% off and free shipping with promo code ArsenalVision. So just wanted to show you this thing. I love it. It has a guard. All the areas can thank this tool. And it is beautiful. It stands in a little base that charges it. Thing is awesome. They got great products. They got ones for your ears and your nose too, called the Weed Whacker. 20% off and free shipping when you do that. So I definitely hope you will get on that right away, and I'm sure you all will, because you know we love you, and we love Manscaped because they support this wonderful craziness that we call the Arsenal Vision post-match podcast and live stream. And Jess, you are back, and was that enough for you, Jess?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of enjoy them because it's kind of cringy, but yeah, that was good. Thanks. In the corner that says that.
Get away from
It's
me.
not just for men. Okay, Jess, you talk about like the world is a funny place, and Unai Emery is back in our life. We cannot lose to Unai Emery. Please tell me. It is such a weird situation because now we got Shaq at left back and Chambers at right back, and we're playing this sort of hybridized 4-3-3 thing, where a 3-3-4 thing, depending on how Clive and I can argue about it later on the podcast.
3-3-4.
Yeah, I hear you. I don't think it's going to be Ceballos Thursday. I think Odegaard might come back in. I don't know if it'll be Nketiah, but maybe Obo come back in. Are you nervous about the fact that we have a new system, players in new positions, and uncertainty at some of the most key positions going into a battle against a man who, if there's one thing we can say about him, he's going to be watching a lot of film on us and preparing his team for us specifically. So how nervous are you that we have this new situation just as Unai Emery returns to our life?
I think I'd be more nervous about it if we hadn't taken to it so quickly and done so well with it in such a short period of time. I think it suits the players, and it's kind of like when we implemented the 3-4-3, it worked for them for a certain amount of time and they seemed pretty comfortable in it for a while. So I'm not that worried about it. I personally think that this is a storyline more for the media versus like actual reality. I don't think Villarreal is a better team than us. I think it's always up to Arsenal. And Unai Emery, he'll watch film, he'll be pragmatic, he'll do some voodoo or whatever he wants to do to try to get over. But if we play our game and we play the way we played in the last couple of games to finish our chances, I'm not that worried about it. I know that they're better than Slavia Prague, but they're also not the best team in the world. So he can watch all the film he wants to watch. I'm sure Arteta will also be very, very prepared. He strikes me as somebody who does his homework. So if this is the system that we go with for that game and we have the right people in those positions, even if we're maybe missing an Odegaard who hasn't really played in this system really, I think it's fine. I really only worry about our mindset and our mentality. I don't worry about the other team as much because it's mostly up to us. We can be a mid-table team or we can look like a top 4 team like that based on our mentality. So I'm not that worried about it, to be honest. I think the Emery thing is just more because he used to be a coach, and all that kind of stuff, but he doesn't even really know these players that well, to be honest. This is a different team to the one that he has. Or
yeah.
He had.
Yeah, that's true. And the good news is, because we tried so many things this season, how will he know what to expect? One last look outside the stadium as the protests continue in earnest. We're going to wrap this up here, but before we do, let's get a quick prediction about tonight and a quick look ahead to Thursday one more time before we go. Clive Emery is back. Thursday is massive. I mean, it feels weird to talk about needing to qualify for a competition we just tried to explode and destroy. It's kind of like saying we really need to land in that Death Star right after we tried to fire the photon torpedoes down that little tube or whatever it was that you Star Wars people. I just feel like that is our whole season, and that is everything. Yeah. Tonight doesn't feel important to me. How do we get the balance right? What do you expect from the players tonight? That they come out fired up to show something for the fans, to prove themselves, to earn their spot for Thursday, or that they can't lift the emotion in light of everything happening around them?
I'm worried about tonight's game. You know me, I think we win every game. Right, and so I'm worried about tonight's games. That tells you something. But we know within 5 minutes. I think there's an excuse there, and we give players excuses, they'll take it. Right, so but Thursday is everything. So let's see how we go. We need to be more efficient, definitely. Everton, I'm not sure if their team is Calvert-Lewin back. I know he was fit, but if he's back, he's rested. Back. Richarlison is a player that I would love at Arsenal. You're talking about centre forward. That's the one we need. You know, I'd have him. He's got a lot. He's got a lot about him, and so yeah, I'm concerned. I'm also concerned that people are not going to let up. They're going to see weakness in the top six, and they're going to keep kicking them in their shins, and I'm worried about that. If you listen to the Klopp interview and Pep interviews today, I'm not sure if you got to see them. I urge you to watch them, and the listener, watch them, because they talk about a Champions League, a new format, an extra 6 games. And they are concerned. This is what this is all about. This was an attack on the Champions League, and subsequently our broadcasters made it an attack on English football because they took away the sporting merit. This was an attack on the Champions League. This was an attack on UEFA. That problem is still there. This is an attack on make sure FIFA don't keep expanding the World Cup. That problem is still there. Football needs a reset. It needs a review. And when we're having fun demonstrating tonight against our stupid owners and our stupid board, we sort of knew they were stupid. Now we really know they're stupid. But I'm a football fan as well as an Arsenal fan. And there's a lot to do. And this is not over. And we need to react properly and with maturity, you know, and really look at what the problems are with the game around player well-being, etc. So that's where my head is, Elliot. I almost didn't want to come on because I'm too sensible. I get too serious too quickly. Right, and I know I do.
There's one thing these shows are, Clive. They are very deadly serious. You know that, as the Got Bush logo appears in the upper right-hand corner and shaves it away with that lawnmower 3.0.
I can see Jesse's face going, oh.
What am I signing up for?
It's like, why really? I just can't help myself. This is how I feel, and I'm developing this in my mind, and I'll be ready for the podcast next week.
Well, we'll have the instant reaction pod that you'll be ready for at full time for patrons, and then
remember,
a full pod
you need a headline. You need stock rising and stock falling. Don't forget the assignment, Clive.
We're going to have Jess on instead of you, Clive. She knows the format. She knows the format. Well, we do love you, everybody, for joining. Quick prediction. Jess, what's the score going to be tonight?
Oh, man. Arsenal 2, Iwobi 1.
2-1. Well, that's 3-0 to Arsenal then, isn't it? Clive, you got a prediction?
I'm going to go 2-2, but I'm worried. I'll be honest with you. I'm worried. But maybe that's just Elliot worries, right?
Yeah, I think it's real worries. DCL could be a headache for Holding and Marie. That'll be an interesting battle for them. He's real tough in the air, and we've had a little bit of trouble with that. One last look outside the stadium where the fans continue to express their perspective on Kroenke out, and we certainly hope that the message is heard loud and clear. May you live in interesting times is both a proverb and a curse. And we certainly are experiencing that right now. I will say 10-0 to the Arsenal, obviously. I will say that we cannot wait to chat with you on the full pod on Monday when we can really properly look ahead to Thursday's game against Villarreal, which I hope by then this nonsense will have washed away so we can get excited about. Guys, I was so excited for the semifinal. It's huge. It's Emery, Champions League on the hook, maybe a final against United. So much there. And I just hope it hasn't taken the wind out of the sails of the players, and that as fans, this will subside, and by next week, we're feeling back to our best, and we will have a pregame show for that big semifinal tilt next week as well, and hopefully Clive and Jess will be there for that as well. So, Jessica, you are on Twitter at It's Jessinho. You have a phenomenal podcast called She Knows Arsenal, and I hope everyone will watch, and I hope that we'll talk to you soon.
Yep, I'll talk to you guys soon. Bye, y'all. Be safe.
Be safe. Bye. That's Jess and Clive, my man. I assume I will chat with you at full time.
Yeah, I think so.
Let's see how you're doing. You're on the red wine, so you never know what's going to happen. Thanks, Clive.
Yeah.
I'll talk to you soon one way or the other. Clive's on Twitter, Clive PFC. Thanks, man.
Take care. Bye.
Bye. My name's Elliot Smith. You can block me on Twitter at Yankee Gunner. Thank you, everybody. We do love you, obviously, and it means the world to us that you're here, that you joined for this. I'm supposed to say smash the like button, smash the subscribe button, just tap it. You don't have to smash anything. They're nice devices that you have. Just be nice to them and be nice to each other and be nice to Arsenal fans generally, because we love each other and we love our club and we're going through it right now. So more than anything, I just hope that everyone is healthy and happy, in good spirits, up for the game, up for the semifinal, and will join us in the future. So until then, we love you and we will talk to you after Arsenal 10, Everton 0.